Welcome everyone to the first September meeting of the Rotary Club of Des Moines. I'm President Becky Greenwald. You know, I start these meetings this year with a little factoid about Rotary. I had members say, oh, I don't know all these little details about Rotary. Can you tell us something? So each time I've got a little snippet of something to share. And in honor of our speaker, I thought this is very appropriate to talk about our newest and seventh area of focus, the environment. So just a little more than 3 years ago, in June of 2020, the Rotary Foundation trustees and the Rotary International Board of Directors voted unanimously to approve the environment as an area of focus. And focus areas are those categories of service activities which are supported by Rotary International Global Grants. So supporting the environment became Rotary's seventh area of focus, joining peace building and conflict prevention, disease prevention and treatment, water, sanitation and hygiene, maternal and child health, basic education and literacy, and community economic development. And in the last 5 years, Rotary International Foundation global grant funding has allocated more than $18 million to environment-related projects over the past few years. And creating this new distinct area of focus of support of the environment allows our Rotary members to even have more ways to bring about positive change in the world and increase our impact. It may attract some additional new members to our club. So think about who you know that's really involved in environmental issues and they might be interested in joining us. Maybe even you. So, for inspiration, I just want to remind everyone that we welcome you to sign up to give an inspiration at one of our weekly meetings. And it's worth 50 points on the 1911 challenge, so yeah, please consider that. And since no one signed up, it's going to be me. And so I thought, Kitty and I were talking. She says, you know, there is a big football game going on in this state on Saturday. So I thought, okay, let's look and see what famous quotes from football players and coaches and football sages might have to say to inspire us as we think about the Iowa State game. First of all, Walter Payton said, I want to be remembered as the guy who gave his all whenever he was on the field. And then Tom Brady, the adversities challenge you to dig in and to work with your teammates to try to get the problem solved. A couple of anonymous inspirations. If you can't outplay them, outwork them. My first personal favorite, if you're going through hell, keep going. I know we have moments we might want to remember that one, not on the football field. Here's one from Jerry Rice. The enemy of the best is good. If you're always settling with what's good, you'll never be the best. And there was a second Jerry Rice when I couldn't resist. Today, I do what others won't do. So tomorrow, I can accomplish what others can't. Just thought, wow, Jerry Rice, you go. Now I had to look up Alex Smith. I'm sorry, I'm not a big football follower, but I did see that he used to be the quarterback for the 49ers and the Chiefs, and then he was at the Washington Redskins. And he was named the 2020 NFL Comeback Player of the Year. But Alex Smith, you guys probably knew Alex Smith already, right? Who already knew who he was? No? Oh, okay. Oh, well then, yeah, there's the photos that needed to, thank goodness for Google. Anyway, Alex said, embrace the new, no matter how uncomfortable, and make it work for you. So I guess that must be working out since he was the 2020 comeback player. Finally, champions don't show up to get everything they want. They show up to give everything they have. Does that one give you goosebumps? It gives me goosebumps. I've learned to embrace the opportunity presented by adversity. Success isn't owned, it's leased. And the rent is due every day. That was J.J. Watts. Have to admit, I looked him up too. He was a tight end, or defensive end of Houston Texans. Now, we got to have a few coaches in on this. So good old Lou Holtz, he told us, ability is what you're capable of doing. Motivation determines what you do, and attitude determines how well you do it. And you got to get Vince Lombardi in, right? So Vince tells us that we would accomplish many more things if we did not think of them as impossible. I'm going to land on Vince Landry. A champion is simply someone who did not give up when they wanted to. So I hope you felt inspired and you're ready for the big game this weekend. Now would you all stand and lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance and our flag-way test. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our flag-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And is it fun? Thank you. Greet your fellow Rotarians. Hey, how you doing, Sean? Oh, okay. I will. Am I going to be sitting down when I listen to it?
You get a good shot.
Okay. All right, I will do that tonight. Thanks again.
Oh, yeah. Anytime we can put it together.
Dig up something else.
Dig up, yeah, have something
I
else.
like your thing for the later this year.
Yes, I think that'd be good.
So go through and I'll have Katie come up and introduce herself. This is like when you're trying to type something and everybody's standing over your shoulder watching what you're doing. We had our technical difficulties all worked out now, so yay, thank you. Okay, so it's tumbler time. I want to ask you to please consider donating $5 if you don't have a little green $sign on your name badge. And even if you do, you can always donate more to our Rotary Club at Des Moines Foundation. And as always, thank you for your support. Now, I want to remind you about our 1911 challenge. The forms are on your tables and out by the badge boxes. And a reminder, if you wanted to have a tabulated version, you need to use your computer. You go out there and it'll add it up for you. It won't do it from your phone. But we want to see those points added up. And remember, 50 points if you do inspiration one week. Okay, be sure to remember to get with Kitty to check out one of the Where in the World is Club 27 on a stick or without a stick. And there are 5 of these checked out now, so we'll be looking forward to seeing where they are when they come back. And now I'd like to ask Katie County to come forward to introduce our keynote speaker today. And as she's coming up, I want to be sure you know that Katie is on our board of directors and is our sergeant at arms. So Katie, it's all yours. Be careful, people be tough.
Thanks, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today as the current president of the board of directors of the Iowa Environmental Council. I am so happy that Jackie reached out and asked me to introduce Carrie today. Carrie, come on up. Carrie Johansson is the Energy Program Director with the Iowa Environmental Council. She leads the IEC energy team of policy, advocacy, organizing, and legal staff to pursue a vision of 100% clean energy for the state of Iowa. Carrie's upbringing on a farm in northeast Iowa led her into the field of energy policy, where she saw major opportunities for investing in rural vitality. She has 15 years of experience in energy policy, including serving as energy staff with the U.S. Senate Agriculture Committee during development of the 2008 Farm Bill, administering the Iowa Power Fund for innovative clean energy projects, and working as an analyst and legislative liaison with the Iowa Utilities Board for 6 years. Carrie now lives in Beaverdale with her husband and 2 kids. She has a BA in political science from Gustavus Adolphus College and a master's in public policy from the Humphrey Institute at the University of Minnesota. Please give a warm welcome to Carrie Johansson.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's wonderful to see a few familiar faces here, and thank you, Katie, for the wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to share with you some of the work of the Iowa Environmental Council, and just to give you some flavor of the scale of some of the challenges we're facing, but also the significant opportunities that we have here in Iowa to take advantage of a transition to clean energy. So the Iowa Environmental Council, we are a statewide nonprofit organization. We are not a governmental organization. Sometimes people confuse that, but we are an umbrella group that has over 100 business and other nonprofit members across the state of Iowa. We are almost 30 years old now, and we're really founded on the principle that business and the environment are really things that go together and should go together. And our work is really centered around addressing climate change, environmental justice issues, and we do that through focusing our work on water quality and clean energy in Iowa. We work actively on federal, state, and local policy. We engage Iowans to try to move the needle on these policies. You'll see us engaged most at the state level, but we do quite a bit of local policy work as well. So I wanted to just open it up with just talking a little bit about some of the recent stories that have brought climate change into pretty stark relief in almost everyone's lives at this point in time. News recently, and we've seen this, folks talk about, you don't think about Iowa as necessarily being a state that is very exposed to climate change, but the reality is that Iowa is fourth in the nation in the last 20 years of states that have been impacted by natural disasters in terms of cost. Billions and billions of dollars in damages related to flooding, derechos, you name it, haboobs, new terminology that we didn't even have, more recently. The 2020 derecho, which many of us here lived through alone, was a $4 billion impact in the state of Iowa. In 2023 so far, I went and looked at the Homeland Security Emergency Management website. We've had 17 natural disasters declared this year in all corners of the state. We had 9 in 2022, 11 in 2021. We're really looking at some escalating disasters happening more frequently. And then, a lot of us saw the news this summer. Many people in this room know much more than I do about insurance and reinsurance markets. And I know there are national and international pressures in this market as well. But the news about the reinsurance companies leaving the market in rural Iowa was obviously a very troubling economic situation as well. So when we look at what do we need to do, the Iowa Environmental Council, the way we work, it's very important to us to make sure we're looking at what science tells us. And when it comes to climate modeling, obviously it's very complex. But we know, and we've heard over and over again, that what we're trying to do is to limit warming globally to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We know that warming is primarily driven by fossil fuel combustion to create power for electricity, for our vehicles, for industrial purposes, and that to meet our goals, coal generation in the U.S. in particular must decline 82% from 2019 levels by 2030. So we have a hill to climb if we're going to reach the overall goal of net zero by 2050, which will help us limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that means not just electricity, but all global greenhouse gases from all sources. released into the atmosphere equal those that are going into carbon sinks. And so if we're going to achieve those goals, that means increased electrification of building energy usage, increased electrification of vehicle transportation, and all kinds of other solutions, right, that go with those things. But those are all really based on the bedrock of a decarbonized electricity sector by 2035. And we know that it is 2023 right now, right? So we know that we have some challenges ahead of us, but we think that there are so many opportunities to really start to make a dent on this. So in Iowa, we have an exciting story to tell. Our generation of electricity went from very dominated by coal generation in 2000, which doesn't seem that long ago to me, but I guess it's 23 years ago, to really reversing course. And we've seen wind energy really take off in the state. We're one of the national leaders in wind energy, but you can see that we still have quite a lot of coal on the system today. So we have a ways to go. Where are we at from a perspective of our major utilities? So we have different kinds of utilities in Iowa. We have our investor-owned utilities, Mid-American Energy and Alliant, and then we have rural electric cooperatives and municipal utilities that serve a smaller number of customers. So for our big two utilities, you can see, Mid-American has an impressive amount of wind on their system at 64%. They are still at 23% coal generation. Alliant is also making progress at 38% wind, again, with a significant portion of coal and a much larger chunk of gas on the system as well. So we've made a lot of progress, and one thing we think this sets us up for is, why we believe Iowa should be first across the finish line. If we're going to make this 2035 net decarbonization goal, we think Iowa is set up really well to lead the way in making that goal. We also know that the demand for clean energy is also coming from the goals that companies are setting for themselves to address climate change and meet sustainability criteria, including big companies in Iowa. John Deere has very aggressive sustainability goals, and in 2022 they actually exceeded the goal they had set for themselves and hit 58.9% renewable electricity usage. Kevin Industries has a goal of being net zero by 2050. Google is looking to achieve 24/7 carbon-free electricity by 2030. Procter & Gamble, which has big operations in the Iowa City area, is looking at 100% renewable by 2030 with a net zero by 2040. DuPont is looking to source 60% of their power from renewables by 2030. There are also a number of reasons why, on the flip side of this, renewable energy has been really good for Iowa and can continue to be. So we know that analyses show that wind and solar are actually the lowest cost options available for new electricity generation, and increasingly are competitive even with existing plants. So in many cases, it's actually cheaper to build a new solar facility or a new wind facility and get the zero cost electricity than to just keep buying the fuel, doing the maintenance costs, etc., for existing fossil fuel plants. When that starts to happen, you end up with a system that's just, it's sort of like when the housing market goes a little haywire, and you have a house that's not really in the market anymore, and so you end up with assets that have been invested in that you need to find a way to smoothly transition the system over. And that's really where we're at right now with some of these issues. And so we know that Iowa could have lower rates if we can do this transition well, or more stable rates, because our lower rates really going to be a thing. We need to be skeptical about that, right, when we say that. But I think to at least keep our rates low and stable, we need to really look at how we do this transition well. We've also had, I think the latest figure is $72 million a year in tax revenues go to local governments from wind energy across the state. and about $60 million in payments to landowners that really provide income that's on a steady basis. And you know, what we all know is can be a really volatile market in agriculture and the ag sector. We also have thousands of jobs in wind, solar, transmission, distribution, construction and maintenance. The energy sector is not our biggest sector in Iowa, but it's an important one. And then we also know that increasingly businesses and individuals can make investments in clean energy like solar, energy efficiency that are a good investment that pay off in a reasonable amount of time. Even when we start talking about electric vehicles and the money that consumers can actually save with an EV versus a regular internal combustion engine vehicle. So lots of good economic reasons for us to continue down the path that we're on here. So I mentioned the cost of generation, and this is a chart, this is an analysis that energy nerds really like to read cover to cover, but it's the Lazard analysis, and it shows the levelized cost of energy, and this is unsubsidized. I just want to point that out. So if you're looking at these types of technologies on an unsubsidized basis, you can see that the levelized cost of wind energy about, 2/3 of the way down is at about $26 to $50 per megawatt, compared with a gas peaking unit, which is up there at $151. The cost of nuclear, coal energy, et cetera. So we're looking at really competitive, and even when you get up to the solar PV, utility scale solar PV is now very much in line with that wind energy down here at the lower cost scale. So this is why we're talking about, even just from an economic perspective, the competitiveness of renewable energy compared to traditional fossil fuel sources is really having an impact on these systems. We also know that getting to 100% renewable electricity that is reliable is a challenge, but it is achievable. And there are a lot of people with really good minds who are working on this issue. We're really excited about the federal funding, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, the opportunities those are going to provide in the state of Iowa and as a whole to reduce the emissions per ICC recommendations. So projections show that those two acts alone should reduce emissions, by a really substantial portion below 2005 levels. It doesn't get us all the way there, but it makes a really big dent. I know for me, I was on Radbri, I think, when I heard that the Inflation Reduction Act had passed, and everyone in my family kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but because I was talking excitedly about tax credits and whatever. But for me, it was sort of like, okay, we're gonna fight another day. Like we're still in this. We've got to go back to the mat, make sure Iowa takes advantage of these opportunities, and Iowans have the ability to take advantage of these things, and that our utilities are looking at them closely as well. But we're gonna keep on keeping on here. And then the other pieces of this about reliable electricity is that we really need energy storage, and right now, there's a lot of talk about batteries, and that's certainly one thing. There's a lot of research going on into different types of batteries, but there are also a lot of other kinds of energy storage that are really being researched a lot right now too. And then we know that investing in transmission is another really big part of making the system reliable. And that means that, if there's even a regional weather event, right? Like we're seeing increasingly heat domes and really large winter storms, et cetera, that power can be moved even from one region to another as weather systems pass through. That power can be moved from north to south in the United States and certainly across state boundaries. So that is a really important part of a reliable system. And we also think that Iowa can and should be first across the finish line, as I mentioned. We've already got a significant head start. We've got a lot of good people here working towards this goal, and we think that this can be achieved by 2030. that we can at least get to, I think actually that should be 2035, sorry, 2035. We think our coal can be off the system by 2030. We think some of the gas plants, we're gonna need to figure out a little bit more how gas fits into the picture going forward. We do know, though, that this cannot be done overnight, and it cannot be done without a lot of analysis, a lot of really careful thinking about things like cost and reliability. And so thoughtful planning and the participation of a lot of smart Iowans is what's going to bring us the best outcome here. Policy is also extremely important here. So the Iowa Utilities Board is the economic regulator of the utilities. Their regulations matter a lot. What our legislature does matters a lot. This also filters down into local issues at boards of supervisors around siting of renewable energy projects, the federal incentives, siting of large-scale energy infrastructure, which we know is increasingly difficult. So there's a really complex policy landscape, but we do see a path forward to really achieve these goals. And just to share a little bit of my own reasons for doing this work. I am a mom. I have my little one started her first day of preschool today, and she did awesome. I'm so proud of her. And so I'm really invested in the future of my kids' ability to thrive here in Iowa. But even before I became a mom, I think one of the things that was always really important to me, that I think I learned growing up, was really about fairness, right? Like the things that we treasure and value, the things that I treasure and value are things that I want other people also to be able to experience and treasure and value. And it's the kind of thing, like if I showed up at a birthday party and like ate all the cake before anyone else got there, my parents would have been horrified, right? Like that is a no-no, you do not do that. That's a little bit of how I think about the environment. It's our job to enjoy what we have here and to treasure it and to make sure that everybody else gets some too, right? Because it's something that we all deserve. So I'm not going to go over all these points. You can see them. You can see my nephews. But we really strive for this balance between achieving environmental aims and having those aims be consistent with economic growth and to be workable. So I'm really excited to hear questions that you have. I know this is like at the 30,000 foot level, so if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to answer them, or about things that aren't about our whole electric sector, that's fine too. So thank you very much.
I saw that on your chart that coal had come down drastically and then took a spike upward again. What caused that spike?
So the question was what caused the spike in coal generation, and I think that was in 2021, I believe. It's not entirely clear, like the information that we have in our party too. The utilities could probably tell you a little bit better why that spike happened. 2021 was a year of high energy use. That was the year that the Texas freeze happened, and so it could be pointing to ramping up plants during that time. That would be my guess, but I'm not entirely clear. It could have also been lower wind generation that year. Maybe some things were down for maintenance, so it's a little hard to tell.
Yeah, has the council taken a position relative to nuclear power, ethanol, biodiesel, and then finally carbon capture pipelines?
Wow. So the question was whether the council has a position related to the most controversial topics. So nuclear power, ethanol, biodiesel, and carbon capture pipelines. So on nuclear power, we do not have a council position on that power source. You know, my personal thought is that we have to be thoughtful and realistic about what the power sector needs to be carbon free. And so I think we need to be really thoughtful about cost issues when it comes to nuclear, and just really think about, you know, comparing the costs and benefits there. Obviously, you know, safety, et cetera, but to be really realistic about knowing that having no carbon is like the number one thing we need to really think about soon. And so on the ethanol and biodiesel front, you know, that's an issue that is really complicated in the state of Iowa. And, you know, ethanol and biodiesel have both been really big economic drivers for a lot of communities in the state. We really see transportation going to mostly electric sources for passenger vehicles. We know that there's opportunities to use, you know, ethanol in other ways. We know that there are innovations happening in things like jet fuel, et cetera, but we also know that on the other side of the coin, there are so many questions about land use and how really intensive land use is affecting other resources in Iowa, including our water. And so it's a really hard issue. It's not one that we have an explicit position on, but certainly we think that protections need to be in place to make sure that our natural resources, including our water, are adequately protected regardless of what we're using corn and soybeans to make. And then the carbon pipelines, we have not taken a position on the carbon pipelines.
Carrie, thank you for your presentation. I'm curious about your comments regarding the emerging technologies necessary for energy storage. And I'm just wondering, as a part of this bipartisan legislation that was passed, are there tax credits involved with encouraging developing these other energy storage capabilities and technologies?
So I think so. The size of those two pieces of legislation is so massive, it's almost mind-boggling. And so there's a lot of R&D focus in these, and I believe batteries is one of those things. I know hydrogen is one that Iowa in particular is competing to be a hydrogen hub for development of that technology. And yes, like there is money for R&D for battery storage development, and batteries are also eligible for tax credits now as part of the generation system. So that should be a big help, because previously they were eligible if they were co-located with a solar facility, but that's not always the best place to put them. So yeah, it should free things up to make it easier to use. Yep. Yeah.
Carrie, first of all, thank you. Secondly, the Iowa Utility retired board member speaks very highly of you. Can't mention any names. The question is though, so Iowa's going to do all these great things for the environment, and so is the United States. But what the heck's happening in the rest of the world? China's going crazy, putting all this crap in the air and crap in their water, and so how do we? So we clean our act up, but everything else is shitting on it.
So the question is really about if the United States, you know, takes action on climate, and you know we're not seeing the rest of the world follow suit. What does that mean? So I think that comes down to a question of what do we lose? Like, what's the downside of taking action on climate? And I think with the economics of renewable energy shifting significantly, with the benefits to quality of life, air quality, life expectancy, the kinds of other benefits you get from clean air and water, and the global competitiveness this helps create, because we know places like Europe, right, are like heavily demanding clean energy, and that will become increasingly the case. So it like worries me. Like, it's something that I worry about as a person who's very worried about climate change. But I don't think that there is necessarily a downside to deciding to take a leadership position and go ahead and do it, because what's the downside to doing all of those things? Yeah.
Why has solar been behind wind, and is that going to continue into the future?
So certainly in Iowa, solar has been behind wind, and I think that the reason for that is really the structure of the tax credits, the way that they were initially created. Iowa has really good wind resources. Anybody knows who lives here, right? It's blowing all the time. But that means we create a lot of electricity when we put up a wind turbine. And we also have a really good solar resource. We can grow a lot of stuff. But the wind tax credits were structured such that the utilities were more able to more easily use them, and to get more bang for their buck when it came to the wind tax credit. The solar credits have been restructured in the Inflation Reduction Act to hopefully be more accessible, but we're still going to see that sort of gap between how many hours a day and how many megawatt hours you can get from solar versus wind. And so that's why it's really important to have the planning, because you need both resources. You can't just rely on wind. So that's where it gets to be like, okay, so how do we look at the whole system and look at cost, but then go beyond that to also look at reliability and a resource mix that makes sense.
I have a question, actually, it was prompted by hearing economic competitiveness behind me from Mark, which oftentimes people, I think, make decisions based on economy, right? So is there any data or information that is showing that businesses can promote more environmental friendly practices and still be economically viable, whether it's consumer, ESG? Just maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just to point back to, I know I just showed one slide. There's certainly a ton of additional information there about what actually is the lowest cost way to build our electrical system. And it is no longer coal. It is wind and solar. And so when we think about economic competitiveness, and we have states like Indiana recently where a utility there did a whole analysis of their fleet, and they realized they needed to build it on an economic basis. They needed to build a lot of wind and solar and close down the majority of their coal plants, because that was the economic balance. And so there's certainly a lot of evidence that on an economic basis, our electrical grid, the cheaper way to go is renewable energy. I don't know, in terms of how ESG flows, I have to assume that businesses would know how much that benefits their bottom line. And I think that, some of the businesses we listed up here are doing pretty well for themselves on a quarter by quarter basis, and seeing sustainability as one way that they're achieving those results. But I work for a nonprofit in the policy sector, and I would love to have, more conversations about how people here see that on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for your presentation. First, a comment. I noticed on a slide with those nephews of yours that there wasn't an Iowa Hawkeye t-shirt.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that I outed you as an Iowa State fan. No. The other thing I want to do is, in keeping with building on comments, Greg's poop comment. No comments about methane gas capture. Is this something that is completely dead in the water, so to speak, as a result of the gas, you're trying to shut down gas power plants, electrification from gas? Because obviously in Iowa, we have a lot of poop.
Right, right. Yeah, so the question is about capture and use of methane gas, sort of the renewable natural gas idea. Is that what you're talking about? So, I mean, the issue with renewable natural gas is, even though, yes, like we do have a lot of hog manure in Iowa, it's actually not a great feedstock to create a lot of renewable natural gas. Just, it's like chemistry that I don't. But that's really, so that's a challenge. It's also, you know, you'll see pretty big projections of the potential amount, but it's just really not that much compared to how much natural gas we really use. And so, to me, when I look at the potential versus what's really happening out there, frankly, it seems more like a red herring. Or a way to sort of extend the life of some conversations around gas than it does to have a lot of potential. But I also, you know, methane is very powerful greenhouse gas. And so is there still value in stopping methane emissions? Yes, right? And so I think there's something there to look at. Like, is there a beneficial, something that comes together there that really benefits a couple of things at once, even if it's not going to replace, you know, our gas supply. Maybe there's something there. Yeah.
I just want to say one thing, and I'm sorry to talk too much, but I'm kind of passionate about this. For those of you who have young people in your life, whether they're nieces, nephews, grandchildren, there's a real thing called climate anxiety. I've actually heard it talked about as like climate depression. And so we have a lot of young people that are really concerned about the future of our planet. And I just encourage you, as you're having conversations, to always point out some of the positive things that are happening. Because I realize sometimes at the dinner table, I'm kind of doom and gloom about the earth and concerned about it. And that is not helpful when you're around young people. Because they're sitting here thinking, oh my God, I'm going to live on this place for another 50, 60, 70 years. So just pull some positive nuggets out of what you heard today about what Iowa's doing and solar and renewable, and hold those up, because it is really heavy on our young people these days. So thanks for letting me throw that out.
One more question. You mentioned that your council had not taken a position on the carbon capture pipeline. Why not?
The question is why we have not taken a position on the carbon capture pipelines. One issue is looking at what do we need to achieve 1.5 degrees Celsius reductions. And when we look at the IPCC calculations, we know that carbon capture has to be a part of that. We cannot achieve it without carbon capture. We don't, we're not taking a position that these projects in Iowa are the right way or the right timing to be looking at that. I mean, I think if you were going to invest, billions of dollars in federal money, it could be better spent elsewhere at this point in time. That's one of the issues. The other is that, there's so much work to do in this space. And the Iowa Environmental Council is really, we do a lot of work at the Iowa Utilities Board, but we do a lot of kind of specialized work in terms of really deep in the electric sector. And so this isn't necessarily our bread and butter. We do work on things like big transmission lines that sometimes do require some eminent domain here and there, right? And so, we try to straddle this really interesting space of knowing that, we need to be able to bring people together around large projects where we're working together on something, even when, there's a lot of controversy, even when, I'm a farmer's daughter. I know what that would be like, to have land disrupted, and we've done this, with pipelines over and over again. There's a lot of, people who were impacted by that. So because of those two reasons, basically, is why we have stayed neutral to this point.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much for your informative presentation and all the good work that your organization is doing on behalf of all Iowans. As a token of our appreciation, we've donated a book in your honor to the Des Moines Public Library. Your book will become part of the Rotary Rosie Reader Band collection, and our club donated $40,000 to the Des Moines Public Library Foundation to purchase this band back in 2020. And now, in addition to our every Thursday at noon meetings, we have at least 2 additional opportunities every month to get together and meet with one another. And there's information on your table about that. Just want to remind you, also information by the name badges. And this Tuesday is the second Tuesday of the month of September. So our Second Chance Tuesday will be happening again at the Big Grove, September 12th. And the fellowship and fun is free, and the beer and food is on your own. So I hope you can join us there. We had a good time last month. And September 14th, next Thursday, our Thankfall evening social event at Jester Park Nature Center. The deadline to sign up has come and gone. It was Tuesday. We needed to let our caterer know so they can get that beef cooking, or smoking. That's the word. At any rate, a huge thank you to our event sponsor, Newman Brothers. I want to thank Josh Braby for making that happen, and our music sponsor, MDS Records Management, Eric Dickinson. And now for our upcoming meetings. Remember, you and your guests can come to any meeting, but you need to RSVP by 9 a.m. on Wednesday before our Thursday meetings. And you cannot register a guest online. You do need to talk with Kitty and go through Kitty on this one. So as a reminder, next Thursday at lunch, where are you going to be? Not here. That's right. We'll be at Jester in the evening from 5 until 7. Really looking forward to a good time. September 21st, State Auditor Rob Sand will be speaking with us. And I'll be out of state on business that day, and Kevin Kassir has agreed to step in on my behalf. And then back on September 28th, Jacob Nicholson is the Chief Operating Officer of the Office of the Governor, and he'll be here to talk to us about the state government reorganization that's going on. So, with all that in mind, looking forward to not having anybody show up here Thursday for lunch next week. And we'll have a good time at Jester Park. We'll be back the following week. I want to thank you for being with us today, for being a vital part of this Rotary Club of Des Moines, where Club number 27 means business. So until we meet again, let's go out there and have fun and do good in the name of Rotary. This meeting is adjourned.